They say you don't notice the years slipping by until the day your little boy speaks with a man's voice. That's how it felt with Andrew. One morning, I was packing his school lunch, listening to him rattle on about video games and his favorite cereal. The next, he was nearly 18, his jawline sharpening, his voice a soft baritone that startled me every time I heard it from down the hall. I'm Anna, 43. I like to think I've aged gracefully, blonde, fit, confident. People still turn when I walk into a room, not just for how I look, but for how I carry myself. My husband? Always working. Always somewhere else. So it's just me and Andrew, under the same roof more often than not, sharing the quiet. Lately, that quiet has changed. He's been distant, thoughtful in a way boys usually aren't. And more than once, I've caught him staring at the floor after hanging up the phone, his brow furrowed as if the world's biggest question was eating at him from the inside out. Last week, I found him in the kitchen long after dinner. I could tell he wanted to talk, but didn't know how. He kept pacing, his hand running through his hair, avoiding my gaze. "Mom," he finally said, "can I ask you something weird?" I smiled, trying to be gentle. "You've asked me weirder things, believe me." He didn't laugh. His throat bobbed. What if I'm not into girls? What if I'm into guys instead? I stayed still, though a chill ran down my spine. Not from shock, but from the realization that this was what had been weighing him down. "Why do you think that?" I asked, softly. He shrugged. "I don't know. I don't feel anything when girls flirt with me. They touch me or smile, and I just nothing. I feel broken." My heart cracked right then. Not because of what he said, but because of how he said it. Like he was ashamed of feeling confused. "You're not broken," I told him. "You're just trying to understand yourself." But I saw it in his eyes. He didn't believe me. And that's where it began. The journey of a mother trying to help her son not find an answer, but his own. It had been a week since Andrew opened up to me, and something between us shifted after that conversation. It wasn't just that he had shared something personal. It was how much he wanted someone to tell him who he was, as if he couldn't trust his own reflection. Since that night, I'd noticed little things. He hovered around me more in the kitchen, asked questions he never used to ask, about emotions, about people, about love. He watched me closely, like he was studying something, looking for signs. And I knew I couldn't give him answers, but maybe I could help him find his own. So I started doing small things. Wearing perfume again. Leaving my hair down more often. Laughing a little louder when we watched movies together, just to see if his gaze lingered. Not because I was trying to seduce him, but because I needed him to see a woman. Not just his mother. A real, breathing woman who could remind him that his heart wasn't broken. It was just waiting. That Saturday evening, I did something different. We weren't going anywhere. We didn't have guests coming. But I wore the dress. It was navy blue silk, sleeveless, hugging my waist like it had been tailored just for me. I pulled my hair into soft waves, stepped into my favorite heels, and swept on a touch of lipstick. When I came down the stairs, Andrew looked up from the couch and froze. His mouth parted slightly, like he was about to say something but forgot how words worked. I gave a small smile and walked into the living room, the click of my heels echoing softly in the silence. He blinked. "Are you going somewhere?" "No," I said. "Just felt like dressing up." "You look," he stopped. Swallowed. "Beautiful." "Thank you," I said, keeping my tone casual, but inside something fluttered. Not because I wanted his approval, but because I saw something in his eyes that hadn't been there before. Not confusion. Not shame. Just surprise. As if something in him had stirred, and he wasn't sure what it was. I sat down beside him on the couch, our shoulders not quite touching, the air charged. We watched a movie, some romantic drama he had picked without realizing what it would awaken. Halfway through, a kiss scene came on, slow, intense, emotional. Andrew shifted in his seat. I said nothing, but I felt it. The silence between us wasn't empty anymore. It was full of questions neither of us dared to ask aloud. As the credits rolled, I turned to him. "You okay?" He nodded slowly, then turned to look at me. "Really look." "I think. I don't know what I feel," he admitted. "That's okay," I said. "But sometimes, the body knows before the mind catches up." He gave a small laugh. "That sounds weird." "It is weird," I agreed, smiling. "But that doesn't mean it's wrong." He looked down at my legs, then quickly away, cheeks flushing.
"I didn't call them out. I didn't have to."
I just leaned closer and said, "You're allowed to feel whatever you feel, even if it surprises you." That night, he didn't go to his room right away. He lingered in the hallway, eyes on the floor, shifting like a boy with too many thoughts and nowhere to place them. And I knew the space between us was changing, not in the way that scares people, but in the way that reminds them how fragile and deep human connection can be. Especially when it's born out of love, confusion, and the quiet desperation of trying to find yourself in someone else's reflection. The next evening, I planned ahead. Dinner was light. Conversation was easy. Andrew seemed more relaxed than usual, less guarded, as if some quiet inner pressure had eased. Maybe it was the way I'd spoken to him the night before. Maybe it was just time doing its gentle work. After we cleared the dishes, I suggested we watch another movie. This time, I picked it. "I want to show you something," I said, handing him the remote as I queued up a film from the old collection, one of those understated romantic dramas that most people forget existed, but which I knew could stir something buried in the soul. The kind of film that didn't rely on kissing scenes or obvious passion, but the aching, unresolved glances between a man and a woman who want each other but can't say it. Andrew looked at the title. "Never heard of it." "That's because it's not for boys," I said with a half smile. "It's for people who felt something they didn't know how to name." He laughed under his breath, but didn't argue. I went upstairs, changed into another dress. This one a soft, wine-colored wrap that caught the light when I moved. It wasn't revealing. It didn't need to be. It was the way it clung to me when I walked that mattered. I added perfume. Just a touch behind the ears. When I came down, he looked up, then away quickly, but not before I saw the flicker again. We settled into our usual spots on the couch, the room dim except for the screen's glow. The film began, quiet, patient, aching. As it played, I studied him out of the corner of my eye. At first, he looked bored, but gradually something changed. His shoulders stiffened during a scene where the couple shared a slow, meaningful dance. Later, his fingers fidgeted when the woman leaned in close to whisper something that made the man's eyes darken. Not lustful, but raw. I watched his throat bob. Then I got up. No word of warning. "Where are you going?" he asked. "Just hungry," I replied, walking slowly to the kitchen. My heels clicked gently across the floor. I opened the fridge, reached in for a banana. When I returned, I didn't rush. I sat beside him again, peeled the banana, and took a bite. Calm, deliberate. Andrew glanced sideways. I offered it to him without a word. He hesitated, then took it. A small bite. His eyes didn't meet mine, but the space between us was charged. "You know," I said after a moment, eyes on the screen, "real connection doesn't always look like fireworks. Sometimes it just feels like your heart knows before your head does." He didn't respond right away. He held the banana in his hand like he wasn't sure what to do with it. Then, "Do you think you can be confused, even if you haven't tried anything?" I turned to him, letting my voice soften. "Of course. The body can be quiet for a long time, especially if the heart has been afraid to speak." His breath caught. I didn't press him. I just stayed there, beside him, the dress rustling softly as I shifted closer, close enough for him to feel the warmth of me, the scent of my perfume, the quiet steadiness of a woman who knew herself and wanted to help him know himself too. The movie played on, but neither of us was watching. We were listening to the silence, to the breath between words, to the invisible strings that had begun to draw us closer, not just as mother and son, but as two people standing at the edge of something they didn't yet understand. The room was quiet, except for the soft murmur of dialogue from the screen and the faint tick of the old clock above the mantel. I took another slow bite of the banana, partly out of habit, partly out of thought. Andrew was still beside me, his body stiff, his fingers pressed together on his lap. I noticed his eyes glance over, not at me, but at the movement. He looked away just as quickly, his breath catching, like he didn't mean to. That was when I understood. It wasn't about the banana. It was about tension.
Curiosity.
The invisible thread of questions he didn't know how to ask, not out loud, maybe not even to himself. And so I let the silence speak for us. "Do you ever wonder," I said gently, "if we sometimes mistake numbness for confusion?" He didn't answer, but I saw the question ripple through him. "I mean," I continued, "you spend your life being told what you're supposed to feel.
Who you're supposed to like.
But sometimes your heart goes quiet, not because you feel the wrong thing, but because you haven't felt the right thing yet." His jaw clenched. Just a little. I reached for the remote and paused the movie. The still frame froze on a couple mid-embrace, nothing explicit, just intimate.
Raw. Honest.
"Andrew," I said, turning to face him, "can I ask you something?" He nodded cautiously. "When you imagine love, the kind of love that makes your chest hurt in the best way, do you picture someone touching you? Or do you picture someone seeing you?" He blinked. "That's the difference," I whispered. "It's not always about who excites you. Sometimes it's about who makes you feel real." For a long moment he said nothing. Then, his voice barely a whisper, "What if I've never felt either?" I swallowed, my throat thick. "Then maybe," I said, "you're still waiting for someone to reflect back what you've never dared to believe about yourself." His eyes lifted to mine, uncertain, searching. "You don't need to be fixed," I told him. "You need to be free.
Free to ask. To feel.
To not know." I reached out and touched his hand, light as a feather. Not in suggestion, just reassurance. "You are not broken, Andrew. You're becoming." And for the first time, I saw a tear slip down his cheek, not from shame, but from the release of finally being understood. We sat there like that for a long time. Not mother and child. Not answers and questions. Just two people, sharing a silence that held more truth than any word ever could. Andrew sat quietly beside me, his shoulders still tense despite the words we had shared. There was something so fragile about him in that moment, like he was unraveling at the seams and afraid of what might be underneath. Without thinking, I reached up and gently brushed his hair back from his forehead. Just a soft gesture. The kind a mother makes when her child is hurting and can't find the words. He didn't flinch. If anything, he leaned into it. "You always liked that when you were little," I said softly. "Whenever you couldn't sleep." He gave a small laugh, but it caught in his throat. "I remember. You'd sit at the edge of the bed and tell me everything was going to be okay." "And it was," I said. Eventually, my fingers moved through his hair slowly, comfortingly. I thought it might help calm him, but then I felt it. A small sound, almost like a sigh, or relief, or something more. I froze for a split second, unsure. Andrew sat very still. The air between us changed, not in what we did, but in what we didn't say. In the awareness that swept over me, that something had shifted, and we were standing on the edge of something we couldn't name. I pulled my hand back gently. "Maybe we should take a break. Get some air." His gaze met mine, uncertain.
Wide.
"I don't know what's happening," he whispered. And that's when I realized, neither did I. This wasn't about attraction, or about roles. It was about identity, emotion, and how easily the mind confuses comfort with desire when it's starved for understanding. "You're scared," I said gently. And that's okay. But it's important we don't mix up closeness with something else. You need to feel safe. And I need to protect that. He nodded slowly. I didn't mean to. I didn't. I know, I said. You're trying to feel something, anything, that tells you who you are. And I understood that.
Deeply.
Sometimes love feels like warmth, and sometimes it burns when it shouldn't. But knowing the difference, that's what matters. So I stood up and extended my hand. Come on, let's walk. Let's clear our heads. He took my hand, and together, we stepped out into the cool night. Not because we had answers, but because we were brave enough to keep asking the right questions. We stepped out onto the patio, the sky tinted violet, the stars just starting to emerge in that quiet way they do when no one's looking. I expected the cool air to clear my head. Instead, the warmth between us only grew heavier. Andrew leaned against the railing, silent. The porch light flickered above us. Then, without a word, he reached into his hoodie pocket and pulled out a cigarette. I blinked. You smoke? Not really, he said, lighting it. Just sometimes, when I need to feel something. His voice was steady, but something about it made my chest tighten. I watched the flame catch, watched him inhale. He looked so grown in that moment, too grown. A shadow of someone who had seen too much, too young. He held out the cigarette to me. Wanna try? I hesitated, then took it. The first drag surprised me.
Sharp.
Bitter, but grounding. We passed it back and forth, neither of us saying much. Just smoke and silence, breath and warmth. There was no music, no distractions, only the sound of our shared breath in the night. I'm not gay, he said suddenly. I didn't reply. I waited. I just didn't know what it felt like to want anything. I thought maybe I didn't like girls, but it's not that. He looked at me, his eyes glassy. It's that I didn't feel safe. And there it was, the truth. Not about orientation, about vulnerability. Thank you, he said, his voice softer now, for helping me understand myself. He stepped closer and wrapped his arms around me. Not a boy's hug, not a romantic gesture, but something in between. An embrace full of confusion, gratitude, release. I felt his breath at my shoulder, warm and unsure. And I held him back, tight. That was our moment. A quiet goodbye to what we both used to be. A silent hello to something new.